Hey, what is happening? Welcome back. Another edition. Jason Priester, Clemson Insider. We do it every Monday, 7 o'clock, right here. Game week is upon us. Something I know everybody's been waiting for anxiously since, heck, the clock ticked to zero in that Gator Bowl win back over Kentucky. um, I don't know about for you guys, but for me, the offseason tends to go a little bit quicker every year. Used to not be that way. Used to seem for a long time, it seemed like they were a little bit longer every year. But the last few years, they go a little bit quicker for me because, it's nonstop, man. There's just no off season anymore if you're covering the team and stuff. And um, kind of anxious to get to Atlanta. One of the biggest games on the docket this weekend, probably the biggest game on the docket, man. I can definitely make the argument for that, easily make that argument. Number one versus number 14. A team or one of the teams favored to win the national title against a team that's trying to claw their way back into national relevance after kind of taking a step back the past 3 years. There's going to be a lot of emphasis placed on this game, particularly from some people inside the Clemson fan base. And I don't know. I just, it's, you definitely don't want to get your doors blown off or anything like that, man. But I just don't, in the grand scheme of things, you could lose this game and, just say if you lose to Georgia and come back and end up running the table and winning the ACC and getting into playoff, that's a successful season, man. It's still a lot of ways, the season can play out even if you don't get a win on Saturday. I've said it many times, man. I just want to see Clemson compete with one of the teams that's, considered to be the best in the country. I think Clemson's offense should take a step forward this year. Personally, I expect them to take a sizable step forward. Year two in the same system, year two with the same quarterback. You've got a proven offensive line coach. Your wide receivers are healthy. You've injected some dynamic talent into that room with a couple of freshmen. And on the flip side of that, it's hard to get a whole lot worse than what they were last season, particularly in the passing game. They were able to run it pretty effectively at times, but that passing game, it was dink and dunk, and by the end of the season, they were taking no shots because they had no faith in the downfield passing game. Kind of similar to what we saw, in Ireland with Florida State over the weekend. All you guys that tune in here, most Mondays, are already know that I am not surprised Florida State lost that game. Um, I thought Georgia Tech was a little overlooked coming into the season. I think they're going to be pretty good this year, and I said it flat out. I was not buying into all Florida State hype. Number one, because I think DJ is who he is. Number two, because they don't have the weapons on offense that they had the season ago. I will say this: the way their defensive line got pushed around did surprise me a little bit. I was never buying into the fact that they were the best defensive line in the country, like some would have had you believe. But I did not expect Georgia Tech to just own the line of scrimmage that way, man. It was fun to watch, particularly for the first game of the season. Um, so yeah, if you've been tuning into this show the past few weeks, I kind of called that one, man. It was not surprising to me at all. Don't think DJ lost the game for him, but he just kind of is who he is. He's not going to do anything to win it. Um, they just don't look like they have a whole lot of faith in him to push the ball down the field. They took a couple of shots and he was way off target. He did make some big key throws on that game tying drive when their backs were against the wall. Um, but there was one play on that drive. It's 3rd and 9, and I get it. You're in 4 down territory. You're going for it either way, but they call a draw, man. They hand it off and no gain or a yard or whatever it was. That kind of summed up that whole game offensively for me, man. They do not have a lot of faith in that downfield passing attack with DJ as the signal caller. Man, boy, does that sound familiar. Um, I've seen a lot of Clemson fans on Twitter over the weekend talking about, yeah, we tried to tell you all off season. It kind of is what it is. At a certain point, a guy is who he is. And that's kind of where we are with DJ, in my opinion. Anyways, back to Clemson, 13.5-point dogs. Feels about right. I'm not making any prediction tonight. Don't ask for one. I'll do that later in the week. You don't never know what might happen between now and Thursday or Friday. But again, I want to see Clemson be competitive. If they come up short, so be it. I want to see them be competitive. I want to see that offense take a step forward, not just a little step forward. I want to see them take a big step forward, man. I want to see that growth that we've heard about from Cade Klubnik. I want to see that offense, get some explosiveness back. We've heard about them making some explosive plays on the defense, in some of the scrimmages, leading up to this game. And I want to see that translate to real games, to when the live bullets are flying. I think you go back to one of Dabo Swinney's pressers right at the beginning of fall camp. He kind of said the same thing. He was talking about Cade, but he's talking about how good Cade has looked there in the fall camp and off season and back in the spring, but he kind of emphasized that thing with a big but he's got to go and do it on the field, and he's got to do it week after week after week. And I think a lot of people are in wait and see mode. You want to see it before you start believing it, and I can't fault anybody who feels that way after what you've seen the past 2 seasons. I do not have any update on Jaden Lucas. Again, I've not been up there. Heck, tomorrow might be 3 weeks. And I'm not going back up there this week. Heck, if the game was today, I probably wouldn't go to it. But I got 4 more days. So, I do know Lucas was expected back at practice sometime in the middle of last week, but I don't know for sure that he ever made it back. I'll say the same thing I said about Shelton Lewis last week. I'll be surprised if he plays Saturday, just based off some things I heard right after he got hurt in that scrimmage. I think he's going to miss multiple games, but I've been wrong before. We'll see. If I'm wrong, it won't be the first time. Indeed, I was. Indeed, I was. Had a feeling Bryce was going to flip the Duke from the beginning. I didn't. But there's some things I could say about this that I'm not going to say. I had some conversations with Bryce's daddy, Bryce's head coach, after he committed to Clemson. I just say this, his daddy was talking about how his son had just made a 40-year commitment, and how everything's different in Clemson and yada, yada, yada. I know that Duke put a lot of effort into flipping Davis. And a lot of effort. You can see people on Twitter talking about how this money didn't play any factor in this. It absolutely did. I ain't saying it's the only factor, but it played a factor. I know I've been told that Mama has wanted him at Duke all along, closer to home. She wants him to get that Duke degree. I don't know about Daddy. I've heard that Daddy wants the same thing, but I've also heard that Daddy wouldn't have minded if he went somewhere else. But it kind of just shows you the era in which we are living. You got a school like Duke, and Georgia Tech's kind of doing it a little bit too. But Duke's a better example. They don't have Davis is the first 4-star guy they've got in this class. And I think they've got more than 20 verbal commitments in the 2025 class. I'd have to go back and double check that, but I think it's over 20. And Davis is the first 4-star guy. So they can take all their resources, man, and put it into that one guy to ensure they land him, and they can pay him far more than what another team, say like a Clemson or a Georgia or heck, even a South Carolina, pay them far more than what those teams would see his value as, if that makes any sense. If you're a Clemson and you don't have unlimited NIL funds, you definitely can't pay a guy that's never taken a snap more than you're paying, let's say, TJ Parker. You just can't do it. If you do that, it's going to lead to the guys already on your roster heading out the exit door after the season. We'll see what the revenue sharing when it gets put in place. If it gets put in place next year, it sounds like it's going to, but that settlement still got to be finalized. How much that helps, I do believe it's going to help Clemson some. I just, I don't know how much, because NIL is not going away. You're still going to have third-party involvement and those kind of things. But I do believe when you've got $22 million or whatever it is, that final number is going to be, when you've got that much money, and it's not going to be all 22 going to football, but a large majority of it will. When you've got that much money to kind of distribute throughout your roster for football, it'll make things better for a school like Clemson, who's kind of had some problems, or not say, let's say they're not going to be able to pay, what some other schools are going to be able to pay on an annual basis if you're just trying to strictly raise NIL funds. I do wonder, because Davis, he just committed 2 months ago, and there was nobody ever thought Duke was going to let up. They were going to keep coming after him, but it does make you wonder whether the commitment to Clemson was maybe a ploy to get Duke to up that offer. I'm not saying that's what happened, but it does make you wonder. Talked to Amari Adams Friday night. He said he's still got multiple schools coming after him, named South Carolina and Florida State by name. He's a guy that I think is fully locked in. You don't have to worry about flipping, and touched base with Tay Harris yesterday too, and I think he's a guy you don't have to worry about flipping. I think most of the other guys are probably pretty solid. Brady's got Clemson with the upset. Here's another one picking Clemson the upset. The Georgia Tech game at Virginia Tech got a lot more interesting this year. Yeah, Georgia Tech, it has kind of proven, I think most people inside the Clemson fan base had more belief in Clemson than, let's say people in the national media or people that cover the ACC in general or cover other teams that not named Clemson. I mean, just go back to the ACC preseason poll. I think Florida State got 80-something first-place votes. Clemson got 50-something first-place votes. Georgia Tech down, middle of the pack somewhere. SMU too. I think SMU, I forget, they were 7th or 9th or something like that, man, and they barely get by Nevada as a 4-touchdown favorite. Looks like they're going to fit right in the ACC, but I think Georgia Tech's going to give a lot of teams problems this year. And they beat Florida State the other day with Hayes King probably not playing as well as he will. I've seen him play better than what he did Saturday. I'm not saying he played bad by any stretch. I'm just saying I've seen him better. Um, I am anxious to see how much improvement Virginia Tech's made too. But Georgia Tech's kind of thrown a wrench into this thing right off the jump. Georgia top 2 running backs will be out. I don't know. I lean towards thinking ETN's not going to play, but I don't know. I've not seen that confirmed. Kirby Smart did not confirm it today. Robinson's the other guy's out. He's hurt, turf toe. But they still got some other backs, man. They can step up. Branson Robinson be on one. Kind of been there a couple years now. Guy Clemson went hard after. He's a guy that they're high on. Hasn't played a lot yet, but they got some other dudes at running back, even if ETN's out, which I lean towards thinking he's probably not going to play. That's kind of what I was hearing, a week or so ago. Anyways, I hadn't heard much about it since. But, his case was pled down, and he ended up only pleading to reckless driving. The DUI was dropped, and let's not forget Clemson's got a couple of guys on their roster who were arrested over the offseason. They're not suspended either, so. FSU didn't show up on defense effort-wise, but I don't think they're complete trash. 8-4 season, 11. No, I don't think they're complete trash either, man. That's the aspect that surprised me a little bit, was the way Georgia Tech's offensive line just kind of, mostly dominated Florida State up front on their defensive front. They rushed for close to 200 yards. A lot of them came after first contact. It was not what I was expecting to see. I was not surprised with what they did on offense, but I was definitely surprised with that defense, man. It's particularly that rush defense and particularly that defensive front. But no, I'm not going to sit here and say they're trash by any stretch. Way too early for that, particularly not if we're in this 12-team playoff, and all you got to do is win the league to get in, and all you got to do to get to Charlotte is finish in first or second place in the ACC with the divisions being gone now. So far too early to write them off. If they can get that defense shored up, and there's talent on that defense, if they can get that thing shored up and do what Clemson's kind of done the past couple seasons and lean on that defense more so than they do the offense, and they don't have the most difficult of schedules. I'm not saying it's a cakewalk, but it's not one of the more difficult ones out there. They can certainly get back on track and lock up a spot in Charlotte. I'm not saying they will, just saying it's possible. If I had to sit here and venture a guess today, I'd say they're not going to be in Charlotte. Seems like until there is an NIL cap where everybody is on equal footing, these decommits and fake outs are going to keep happening. Yeah, I don't know what the answer to that is. I don't know that you're going to see a cap on NIL. So it's just, I know Eric Backett was on the radio Thursday or Friday of last week. I think it was Mickey Plyler's show, and they were talking about the 11.7 going away and being able to offer full rise to all the baseball players. And he kind of talked about NIL a little bit and what it's going to look like moving forward. And he said there were some options on the table. He just didn't go into specifics, and I don't know what they would be, but yeah, it'd be nice to see some kind of something in place to kind of makes it a little more equal for everybody. Whereas where you don't have the schools with the biggest and most the richest alumni bases being able to routinely buy up a chunk of the blue star or the blue chip guys year after year after year to start stacking talent, particularly once we move up, and you start having that expanded rosters, and you can offer full scholarships to 105 guys or whatever it may be. I think it's 105, or I think that's what it's going to land on. But um, that's why the 85 was put in place years ago to keep teams from like Alabama from stacking talent the way they were. Um, the way NIL is structured right now, and with expanded rosters coming, you're going to see teams being able to do that again. But on the flip side of that, once you might be able, the question becomes is how long can you stack those guys, man? Because the way they're able to just move on from year to year, um, it kind of makes it the wild wild west, like everybody calls it. Clemson loses to Georgia week 1, then meets them again in the big one and pulls the win out 2024 Natty champs. That's big expectations there. I've said it a few times. I think this Clemson team's certainly capable of making the playoff. I just don't know how capable they are of making a deep run. And I'm not going to know the answer to that until we get into the season. But as we sit here today, I would probably lean towards thinking they might be still another year off from being able to really, really make a run. Clemson just needs to keep it competitive and not beat themselves with mistakes and errors. That's enough for me after the past few years. That's I'm kind of in a similar spot. I want to see some growth on. I want that offense to look competent against what's going to be probably one of the better defenses in the country. I don't think Georgia's defense is what it was 2-3 years ago, but it's still pretty good. Um, it's going to be interesting to see how much success Clemson can have running the ball because I can envision Georgia kind of keying on that and making Klubnik and those receivers beat them, down the field. And I do think there are some questions in that Georgia secondary. It might they might turn out to be a lead on the back end. Who knows? But as we sit here today, I think there's some unanswered questions there. But that's kind of what I want to see. I want to see Clemson compete with those guys. I want to see them make it competitive and you know not get their doors blown off because you go in there and get pumped. Man, can you imagine what Twitter's going to be like next week? Whew, man, there would be so many people on there patting themselves on the back, talking about, I told you this, I told you that, I told you blah 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 blah. Do you think Cade will go pro after this year? Oh, I can't answer that. Not right now. If he's got any, ambitions of going pro after this year, he's got to show he's got to show real signs of progress. If he has another season like he had last year, no, he won't. I don't see him going pro after this year. And if he comes back for his senior year, then that's going to lead to questions of whether or not Vazina is going to stick around for another year. Um, but whether he goes pro or not, I can't answer that. If he's got any, if he's got any plans on doing that, he's got to be a lot better than he was a year ago. Had so much fun trolling the trolls, saying that DJU would be fixed by Norvell. Yeah, I don't spend a lot of time on Twitter these days just because of all the politics on there, and I can't stand politics. But I did spend some time on there Saturday afternoon and kind of watching the meltdowns commence as soon as that game ended. It was fun to watch, man, because the way that fan base moaned and groaned about not getting in the playoff and then getting boat raced in the Orange Bowl and all the excuses that came out of that. And I get it, all the opt outs they had and all that stuff. But man, you got beat by 60. Um, and all the hype they got coming into this season. To see them get beat the way they got beat, yeah, it was entertaining. Absolutely. Lost cause they can't recruit and develop, live and die by the portal. Yeah, it's definitely an example of living and dying by the portal for sure. Because when you replace that many players with portal guys year after year after year, it's hard to build any team chemistry and cohesion that way. Um, you have to basically start over from scratch every year, as opposed to, let's say, Clemson, who didn't bring in any transfers, and other than the freshman guys that they brought in, it's and the guys that went off to the NFL and graduated, it's the same core of guys. And then you look at a team like Florida State who brings in countless transfers. Man, you're replacing that core, that nucleus of guys year after year after year, and it's hard to. In my opinion, it's hard to build cohesion that way in any kind of chemistry, and you're just never going to know what you got until you get up into the season. The offense has to at least look competent on Saturday. That's the word I like to use, competent. I want to see a competent offense and not one that has to rely on the just throwing slant routes and wide receiver screens and little out routes and leaning heavily on Maffa because you can't push the ball down the field. Um, from as much as I've talked about Cade, man, it kind of it for me it kind of starts with that pass protection, and if you get that, hopefully that'll get your quarterback more comfortable and kind of trickle down from there. But yeah, I absolutely want that. That's first and foremost. You want to see some growth from that offense. You want to see it be able to compete against what is thought to be one of the better defenses in the country, anyways. Will Kirby sit Trevor or any of the other disciplinary players for the Clemson game, or will he let them play because of what's at stake? Yeah, I talked about this a few minutes ago. I can't tell you whether ETN is going to play or not. Kirby wouldn't really talk about it today. Said he's not going to talk about that stuff. Last week I was hearing whispers that he wasn't going to play, but their backup running back's out with the injury. I don't know if that changes things. He's kind of been out all of camp dealing with a turf toe, if I'm remembering that right. But don't forget, Clemson's got a couple players that were in that got in trouble with the law over the offseason too, and they're not suspended either. One on a gun charge, one on a reckless driving charge, and ETN's DUI was dismissed, and he ended up pleading to a reckless driving, so wasn't convicted of the DUI. We'll see if he plays. I don't know. I kind of lean towards thinking he's not going to, but I don't know that for sure. Doesn't Dabo give a media update tomorrow? Dabo's got his radio show tonight, and then he meets with the media tomorrow. Yeah. And I think both coordinators meet with the media tomorrow, too. Let's see. Dabo at 11, Garrett Riley, Wes Goodwin, and select players will be available following Sweeney's press conference. So you get head coach and both coordinators tomorrow. You can always text him on his radio show tonight. Tyler had zero to do with the changes today and very little to do with the team's turnaround. Yeah, I've seen a lot of jokes on Twitter about Tyler ruining the radio show. It was, if that was the reason for the change, it would have happened instantly last year. I can tell you this has been kind of heading this way for a little while now, even before that happened last year. Yes, you're going to have people blame it on that, but from my understanding, it didn't have anything to do with it. And, it was always going to head that way. Defensive line class is still loaded with or without Davis. Yeah, they've got some good ones. Isaiah Campbell, who, man, he's already a big dude. He's probably 265, 270 already. He might be a guy that ends up moving inside, but he was recruited as an end. Ari Watford, the other end, and then you got Adams as the defensive tackle. Yeah, you got three really good ones. Just kind of reloading there. Going back to Davis, it's also close to home, and I know the parents, or at least the mama, wanted him close to home. And again, that dude degree, money absolutely played a big time factor in that thing too. But also they can sell him on being the face of that program. He's not going to be the face at Clemson. He's not going to be the face of the program at Georgia. But they can sell him on that there. He's not going to get there till 2025. Hell, will Manny Diaz even be there in 2026, 2027? I mean, it's Duke. And again, you look at their 2025 recruiting class, there's one blue chip talent in it, and it's Bryce Davis. When is the NCAA supposed to approve the NIL from the TV earnings? I think you're talking about the House settlement. It's got to be signed off on by the players. And I think the players rejected it a week or two ago. So they got to go back and do a little bit of more work on it. But what that means is schools are going to get about, the number that's being thrown around right now is $22 million a year from their television revenue that they can use to pay players. And that's not really supposed to be NIL. It's supposed to be different. And it'll be up to the school to decide how they spend that money and which sport they spend that money on. At Clemson, I think you can bet on them, whatever percentage of that television revenue that football is responsible for, that's the percentage of that $22 million that'll go to football. And, and same for basketball, baseball. But even once that comes into effect, you're still going to have these collectives. You're going to have schools like I saw somebody today saying Ohio State spent $20 million in NIL money on their current team. But with a large majority of that went to guys that were draft eligible who they coaxed into coming back for another year, or guys already on the roster. They didn't, that wasn't a bunch of it used to lure high school kids or those kind of things. But let's say you're going to take 15 million of that 22 million and use it on football, and you got 20 million, another 20 million in NIL funds you can use. That's $35 million a year, because you're still going to have NIL on top of that. It'd be nice to see some guardrails put in place on NIL. I just don't know how it would look like after that Supreme Court ruling that kind of smacked the NCAA a couple of years ago, because people kind of forget ahead of the advent of NIL, the NCAA worked on that legislation for a couple of years. And I don't know what the specifics were going to be. I don't know how it was going to work. But when that Supreme Court ruling came out, they just had to scrap all their NIL plans and implement it with no legislation. There wasn't a whole lot they can do. They were handcuffed by that ruling. You know, it's the NCAA. They probably would have screwed it up either way. But, I do think once we get into the revenue share stuff, it should help Clemson. But it's not going to fix all their problems because they're not going to have $20 million a year to spend in NIL. Smaller alumni base. It's probably been a little bit harder to get some of the older fans to open their wallets and donate to NIL than probably I thought it would be. Probably a lot of people at Clemson thought it would be. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying they don't have any money or anything. I'm just saying I thought they would have an easier time raising some NIL money than they've had for some of the sports. But it should help. I just don't know that it's going to fix all the problems. Here's another Clemson prediction for Clemson to win 22-21. Sammy Brown, do you think he gets any reps at running back? No. Unless it's some kind of trick play. No, he's not been. He's not going to be a running back. He's solely taking reps in linebacker. Will the Tigers try a steady diet of screen plays? That's been a note about Smart's dogs have been hurt by screens in years. Wasn't that obvious to Riley in the national championship against them? I don't know. I don't know what the game plan is going to be, but I would bet you it's going to feature some screens because Riley's offense, there's they do a lot of screening, and that's in his offense, and I don't know that that's going to change. Georgia's defenses have typically been good sideline to sideline. They're good at defending screens, particularly the wide receiver screens and stuff. But if you've got an offense that can stretch the field and beat teams vertically, at least pose that threat more so than you have in the past 2 or 3 years, then you don't have to rely on those screens. I mean, I think you've seen so many screens last year, or you saw so many screens last year because you had a play caller that didn't really trust his quarterback, or let's just say trust his offense to make plays down the field in the passing game. By the end of the season, they weren't even trying them. I mean, they just kind of washed their hands of that and leaned on that running game and tried to dink it and dunk it down the field and trying to score touchdowns on 8, 9, 10, 11 play scoring drives. I don't think that's the recipe for success. I don't think Garrett Riley believes that's the recipe for success. I just think that's kind of where they were last year. But as far as the screenplays, yeah, I think you're going to see screenplays. It's part of his scheme. Yeah, I got a little kick out of that today when they sent the game notes out, and I scrolled down to the depth chart, and 2 empty pages. From my understanding, Clemson didn't release one bit because Georgia didn't want to release one. So. Is Stellato hurt? I think he was a little banged up at one point, but I don't think he was like hurt to the point where he's going to miss any time or anything. But again, I've not been up there. Tomorrow will be, I think, 3 weeks. I've not been up there since the first week of camp. I've been stuck at home. Trust me, that's not by choice, but that's kind of where I'm at right now. I did go stand on the sidelines at a high school game Friday night, trying to test things out and see if I was going to be good to go for this weekend. I made it through the whole game, but again, if Clemson and Georgia played today, I don't know if I'd be able to go. We'll need Cade to make plays with his feet Saturday a couple times. They need Cade to make more plays with his feet, period. If your quarterback's a threat to run, at least, 2, 3, 4 times a game, it'll open up some other things you can do. Defenses will have to account for him. Cade was a pretty good runner in high school, but once he got to the collegiate level, man, I don't know that he was strong enough. He just always go down on first contact. He looks a little bigger, a little stronger right now. We'll see if that translates to him being a little bit more successful in the running game. But yeah, I would say they need it more than just Saturday. They need Cade generally to make some more plays with his feet than he did a year ago. Do you think Wesco starts right away? No, I don't think Wesco is going to start, but I do think you'll see him pretty early. Probably, I think you'll see him within the first series or two. I just don't think he'll run out there first. I think you'll see both those freshmen Saturday. You probably see Wesco before more because Wesco's been there longer. He's a little bit more acclimated and in tune to what they're doing on offense. But I think you'll see both those guys. Playing Georgia early is great for Clemson. Yeah, and I think that for this year, and I'm an older guy, so I remember when Clemson and Georgia played every year, usually early in the year. A lot of times, first game of the year. It's too bad that they don't play, more than what they do, seeing as those campuses are about 70 miles apart and they're natural rivals, ACC versus SEC. They should play more often than they do. They've played. I looked it up today. Let's see. Since 1995, they played 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is going to be the 6th time since 1995. That's just not enough. Just not enough for two rivals. But yeah, specifically for this year, it's gonna give Dabo and that coaching staff, a clear indicator of where his team is, right off the bat, where they need to make improvements, those kind of things. Yeah, it's going to be a very good litmus test. Clemson loses bad. I'm disabling X for a few weeks. Players are locked in. Wasn't against Duke. Yeah, I do think Clemson kind of overlooked Duke a little bit last year. I wholeheartedly believe that. Maybe even in some of the lead up to that game and how they prepared, maybe some of the guys that were going to, maybe there's some of the starters were held out a little too much in practice, trying to get some of the younger guys reps. Um, but yeah, I do think Clemson overlooked Duke a little bit last year, and it showed on the field. Um, when you open it up against the number one team in the country, you're not going to overlook that. Fazina is a redshirt freshman. He redshirted last year. He's not going to Atlanta game golf. Oh, yeah, I got every intention of going to Atlanta. I'm just saying, if it was the day, I don't know if I could go, but I got a few more days to get healed up. I think I'm on the right track. Kirby said he doesn't get the hate Dabo gets about the portal. Wished he'd keep most, if not all, of his players too. Yep, he certainly did say that today. Matter of fact, his direct quote was, "That narrative was much ado about nothing." Um, Kirby's not a guy that leans heavily on the portal. He'll use it to plug some holes, and that's something that I think Clemson could probably benefit from doing too, being a little bit more aggressive in the portal when they need to fill a hole here and a hole there. But that's a different conversation for a different day. That's kind of what Kirby does, and they've been successful at it. But yeah, he pretty much come out and said today, if it was up to him, he'd rather build through high school and developing and those kind of things. It's kind of refreshing to see, another coach come out and say that. Appreciate that, Javante. Yeah, that last line right there. Georgia has way more to lose than Clemson because we're not meant to win anyways. Yeah, I do think Georgia has a lot more to lose than Clemson. If Clemson loses this game, they were supposed to. They're depending on where you look, they're double digit underdogs. You know, if they win, if Clemson were to somehow come out and win, and Georgia loses, man, talk about it. We talking about the meltdown FSU Twitter had. Man, that would be a big time meltdown on Twitter, and it reached further than Georgia Twitter. It'd be some in the national media probably melting down too. But I do think this is a good gauge for where Dabo's team is right now. Again, I've said this a few times, man. There's last time I was up there, anyways. This was a week or so in the fall camp, and I've talked to a few people since then, but I hadn't been up there. But there's some cautious optimism, surrounding that team, and I use the word cautious because, like I said earlier, they're seeing what they need to see on the practice field, but at the same time, you gotta, that's gotta translate to the real games. You gotta go out and do it when the lights are on. I like Dabo's way of doing it, getting high school players, developing into great players and young men. There's another Clemson prediction: Clemson 29, Georgia 25. Yeah, I like Dabo's philosophy for the most part. And fortunately for Clemson, they've not really lost many starters to the portal. Makuba is really the only one, and I guess you can make the argument for Bo Collins, but even if Bo Collins would have returned this year and ran out there first, his snaps are going way down. Just because the other guys behind him are healthy and those two freshmen coming in. But when you're losing 7, 8, 9, 10 players every offseason, depth players, and you keep replacing them with high school guys, you're always going to be young in a lot of spots. I would prefer to see Dabo plug, if there's an immediate need, go get you a graduate transfer for a year to plug that hole for a year while the guy behind him gets ready. I think you can do that and still keep your culture in place. It's a fine line you got to walk, but I do think it's doable. But yeah, overall, I like Dabo's philosophy of focusing on high school, and using the NIL money they have to, spread around to the players that have been there, paid their dues, and those kind of things more so than going out and throwing a bunch of money at a transfer or renting for a year. How confident are you with the field goal kicker if it comes down to winning the game last seconds like the Georgia Tech FSU game? I don't know, man. I don't know. I think the freshman's going to win the job, and Gunn's probably going to still handle kickoffs based on everything I've heard. But, Hoosier's a freshman. You're just not going to know till he runs out there. I had high expectations for Gunn last year. He was one of the best kickers in the country when Clemson signed him, just like Hoosier's one of the best kickers in the country in his class. Go back to Chandler Cantanzaro. As good of a kicker as he was, he struggled his first year. You just don't never know with some of these kickers when they're freshmen and redshirt freshmen, and Hoosier's a true freshman. If it comes down to a game-winning kick, I'd be a little nervous. I would definitely be a little nervous. How much playing time do you expect Wesco and Moore to get this weekend? Oh, I think, I don't know about Moore yet. I definitely expect him to get some. I would think right now at this point, with Wesco being a little bit more familiar with the offense and stuff, you probably see a little bit more of Wesco. I don't think he's going to start or anything. I think you'll see him early, but you probably see a little more Wesco than you will of Moore, and they'll probably start easing more into it against, once they get back home against App State, assuming, App State doesn't sneak up on them and give them a game there, which is entirely possible. The receiver group. Well, first and foremost, man, they are fully healthy. They are fully healthy, something they have not been going back 2-3 years, whatever it's been. If you go back to spring practice of last year, 2023, I think Clemson had, 3 scholarship receivers available. So the receivers are pretty much fully healthy. There might be a guy here or there banged up, but they're not missing anybody right now that's going to be out for weeks or anything. I think everybody, as far as I know, is expected to play Saturday. And if you can keep those guys healthy and you can bring those 2 freshmen along and get them, I like to use the word acclimated, get them acclimated and comfortable with what their roles are in the offense. I like the makeup of the receiver room. There's a lot of variety in it. That's a word Tyler Grisham used a few weeks ago, and I tend to agree. You got more speed in it now than you had with Wesco in there. Moore's faster than he gets credit for sometimes. And I think you got Antonio Williams is fully healthy. Tyler Brown's fully healthy. Troy Stellato just went through his first offseason ever, being able to participate in spring practice, offseason drills, summer workouts, and fall camp. He's never been able to do that before. Last year he wasn't cleared to play to the week of the Duke game. So there's a lot of variety in that room, and if you can keep them healthy, I like the makeup of that room. I expect Clemson to be improved at wide receiver this year, maybe much improved. Am I wrong in thinking we could have a good showing against this Georgia defensive line? I'm very curious to see what this offensive line looks like under Matt Luke. You've got outside of Linthicum at center, you have got a lot of experience, at the other four spots. A ton of experience. Actually, Kirby Smart was talking about that today. How unusual it is to have so many guys with as much experience as Clemson's got. So I do think that is a check mark in the, if you're making a list of pros and cons, that's a check mark on the pro side. I think just by the benefit of having a guy like Matt Luke who's been around, who's done it for so long and had so much success, it's going to make that offensive line better. And it's not like Clemson's devoid of talent. I've said it over and over. I think Clemson's got more talent in that offensive line room than they probably ever had under Dabo. It's just not translated to the field. If you're strictly going by recruiting rankings, anyways, it's full of blue chip guys, at least one 5-star. So there's talent in that room, man, and I expect them to be improved this year. How much? I don't know yet. They could either be drastically improved or they can be somewhat improved. Either way, it's a step in the right direction. And if you can keep Matt Luke there for a few years, I would expect Clemson's offensive line to really be good over the next few years. It's just a matter of how much improvement they make in year number one. It's your first year playing under a new position coach, along with the fact you've got a brand new center who's got very little experience. Does being at 14 verbals now change any recruiting between now and the official signing in December? What will the top be now, you think? I've always said I thought it'd be somewhere 18 to 21, probably closer to that 18 number. It might not be 18 now. We'll see. They're only at 14, and I know they want to add another offensive lineman. I'll be surprised if they chase another defensive end. We'll see. Seeing as they've already got two. For me, what will be interesting is whether Dabo decides to, because it's not like they're going to have a ton of room, after the season, unless you got a bunch of guys that leave unexpectedly. And there'll be some. It's just a matter of how many. But you don't have a ton of guys that are expected to come off scholarship after the season. So it's not like they had a ton of room in this class. But with what room they do have, it'll be interesting to see if Dabo decides to make a more concerted effort to land a guy or two out of the portal. If they decide they have a position of immediate need, or if he just chooses to use those scholarships in 2026, where it looks like you're going to be able to have a bunch more anyways due to the roster sizes expanding to 105. But I don't know how much it changes between now and December. I fully expect them to chase another offensive lineman. Outside of that, I don't think there's anything set in stone. We'll see. Maybe there's somebody that impresses them, over the first few weeks of the high school season, and they decide to throw in and get in on somebody. But right now, outside of offensive line, I don't know, man. I don't know that it changes a whole lot. And I do think, I think losing Davis was a pretty big blow. I think he was the fourth highest rated recruit in the class, at least by looking. I think I was looking at 24/7 on 3-year rivals that might have them ranked different. Um, you talking about, in my opinion, a position of need. You already had to move Peter Woods outside because you didn't have enough depth and experience out there that you were comfortable with. Um, so I do think that's a pretty big blow losing a guy like Davis. And when he gets here, or when he would have gotten here in 2025, that would have Parker be going into his junior year. I would think the staff would probably want to move Woods back inside after this season, and it ain't like Davis would have had a room full of 4 and 5-star experienced guys to compete with and everything. So I do think that's a little bit of a blow. I think if it was at a different position, it wouldn't sting quite as much. But seeing as it was defensive end in a place you're already a little bit thin to begin with, it makes it sting a little bit more. But back to your original question, I don't think it changes a whole lot strategy wise. They'll probably, being at 14 right now, they'll probably end up somewhere around 16, 17, something like that. Who starts at corner opposite of Terrell Saturday? That's if Lucas is healthy and can play, I say him. But I think you're going to see a lot of Ashton Hampton. The reviews for him throughout fall camp have been just dynamite. It's going to be hard to keep him off the field. But if Lucas is still banged up, I think it's Hampton. Kel Williams is the one on Georgia's D to keep an eye on. Some fans seem to be worried about their defensive ends this year, though. Yeah, he's a dude, man. You better know where he's at on every play. Gonna lose wide receivers to the portal next year. Might as well push the young guys this year. Yeah, Noble Johnson's recovered. And I think you're going to see those young guys this year. I expect Georgia to pound a run and expose Clemson's depth very similar to Florida State game plan. I expect Clemson to go to Atlanta expecting to win. Our offense shocks the world. Tigers win 27-21. There's another prediction for Clemson. Yeah, I've not given that any thought, man. I've been asked this, seemed like every week going back several weeks now, and I hadn't answered it on purpose because I haven't given it any thought, and it's a hypothetical that makes no difference. I think we got through about all of them there. Offensive line group struggled during the spring, including the projected starters. I hope Louis make big progress here in August camp. I've heard nothing but good things about the offensive line through camp. I didn't hear terrible things about them in the spring. But when you're going through the spring and getting used to a new style and a new coach and the way he coaches and stuff, there are going to be some ups and downs those first few weeks. But I've heard really good things about the offensive line in camp in the lead up to Georgia and how they performed against the defense. Now, does that mean it goes out and they do that against Georgia? I have no idea, but I have heard positive things. Um, yeah, Gunn had tore ACL while he was a senior in high school, or right after that, if I'm remembering right. So yeah, he did tear ACL at some point, but he was fully healthy last year. I don't think I don't know. If you look at his kickoffs, man, they weren't affected. He didn't have any problem kicking off. I think it was more mental than anything. Do we see a good bit of Cole Turner Saturday? I think he'll be in the rotation. I don't know how much you see him though. And this is not a knock on him, but if Cole Turner is one of the guys you're relying on heavily, man, it's something's going to rise. Something's wrong. Um, I think Cole can be a good complementary piece and he can help you. But if he's running out there first or he's playing 40, 50 snaps, man, well, with what else you got in that wide receiver room, that don't give me the warm and fuzzies. There you go. First one for Georgia. Dogs 38-13. All right. Appreciate it. Oh, hey, man. I can't do it right now because I'm kind of stuck at the house, but you got to let me know one day when you're home during the day and we'll make it happen. Appreciate everybody that's tuned in. We'll be right back here next Monday. We'll be recapping what happened. Stay tuned to the site all week, man. We'll have all kind of stuff coming up on Clemson, Georgia. We'll have predictions later in the week. Even if they're not on the site, they'll be on the message board. So it's keep an eye out for those. I know me and Vandervoort are both planning to do predictions later in the week, but yeah, keep an eye out for those. ClemsonInsider.com. Again, man, I appreciate everybody that tunes in here. We have a pretty good crowd here most of Mondays. We had a really good one in here tonight. We have a good time here on Mondays, and most of that is due to all of y'all. Appreciate it very much. See y'all a week from tonight.